The Sudan, the land of the two Niles, the biggest country in Africa, is one of the richest regions of the Black Continent in archaeological relics. It has been a paradise for adventurers, travelers, and scholars since the 18th century.
Yes, I have to tell you now about my work in the Sudan. I arrived here on the 7th of January 1960 in Khartoum as an architect, working before in Berlin for reconstruction of the Opera House in Berlin and other monuments. And I became very busy with Sudanese monuments. The Antiquity Service in Khartoum asked me to help in the rescue of the temples in Nubia, because they were in the flooded area of the Aswan High Dam. And first I started to prepare estimates for the removal of 5 temples from Wadi Halfa area. And these estimates were given to the United Nations, to the UNESCO, and several countries promised to pay for the salvage of these monuments, and then I was asked to do the actual work. So I went to Wadi Halfa in 1962 and started dismantling temples, Buen Temple near Wadi Halfa on the other side of the river, and Aksha Temple, and Semna East and Semna West Temple. And I moved also the small museum in Wadi Halfa and about 110 rock inscriptions, 3,500 years old. So this were really the start for me in the Sudan. It was really a big job to dismantle the temples, to bring them to Khartoum, to build the National Museum in Khartoum, and to reconstruct the temples and the garden, and to prepare the National Museum and the garden in Khartoum for the public. Then we were in the end of the 60s, we were nearly finishing the project, National Museum. Then Nimeri asked me to move colossi, big 30-ton colossi from the island of Argo near Dongola to Khartoum. And this was another thing. I never used such a experience to move statues 30 tons in one piece. And with a lot of thinking and trying, we succeeded and brought statues from Gezira Argo to Khartoum, erected them in front of the National Museum. This was in 1973. Then I went 1 year to Germany to publish and to prepare other things, and working for a lot of material I collected about archaeological sites. And in 1975, Nekmeddin Mohammed Sharif, the new director in the Antiquity Service, asked me again, sent me a letter and said, Fritz, you must come and help us. We now want to protect the pyramids and the royal cemeteries and chapels in Meroe area. So in 1975, I came back and stayed with Nekmeddin here in a tent and for 1 week, and we were thinking how to do it and what to do. And I started work again in the northern group, saving the most important things, which were the reliefs and the offering chapels. Reliefs of 600 years of history of the Sudan were exposed to the wind erosion and also to people. People came and were writing their names on the reliefs and destroying some of the chapels. So we were busy to save as much as possible. We worked for 12 years and rebuilt 18 chapels and one pyramid. And I found a lot of information about my colleague, the architect, 2,000 years ago, who had to build the pyramids. So I followed his problems, and I tried to follow and to do the same as he did before, with ancient methods. To lift the blocks with a shadoof. He built a pyramid with a shadoof, trying how the ancient method worked and how much problems it gave us. We made the foundation in an old way. We made the plaster with the same mixture as the old plaster in 2,000 years ago. And I found a lot of information, drawings engraved on a wall of a design for a pyramid, 2,000 years old, which gave us information about the proportion base to the height of Meroitic pyramids, very steep, inclined pyramids, not to compare with Egypt. And we followed the technique at that time with a chisel, making in the quarries the stones and preparing them for the construction. The most important thing, building a pyramid, is certainly not moving the blocks. This is an engineer work, and I'm an engineer, and this is not a problem. The problem for building a pyramid is the survey, to keep the same angle on all four sides, to come to a point and not to end like this. So surveying during the construction to really to keep the inclination, the angle, is the biggest problem in building a pyramid. And I found now evidence how they did. They had a central line engraved on each side, and with a plumb they fixed this center line on each layer and measured from this center line with the same length to the right and to the left to have the same angle inclination going on and to finish the pyramid. So it is a technique which formed the architecture. They are building with a shadoof, and they surveyed the proper way of for the inclination to come really on all four sides in the same angle to the top. So this makes a lot of information about Meroitic building technique, about their knowledge, and about the architecture in certain harmonic proportion. The base is normally 5 and the height is 10. This gives us the inclination. 5 to 8. And 5 to 8 is very near to the golden section, and harmonic proportion, which were used in many countries for every time, also in Berlin later on and so on. But here it was really already used 2,000 years ago to prepare the pyramids and the shape of the pyramids and the shape of the pylons for the offering chapels and the ground plan of temples. So we find a highly developed building and construction tradition here in Meroe and in the Meroitic Kingdom, together with the economic development here and writing. We have Meroitic writing developed in the 3rd century before Christ. So we call it, from the historical point of view, we call it an high culture. They developed their own writing. They organized a state, and they had their own economy. So this is a so-called high culture. It's the first high culture in Africa. And you can really very proud about your history in the Sudan. You have something which is extraordinary. And what we are all trying to do is to keep as much as possible of what is left. Wind erosion is one thing. The wind is eating the sandstone. It is very weak sandstone, and we have to protect the reliefs by a roof and a door, and to keep what is left on such a civilization.
We are now here at Naga, standing directly in front of the entrance gate of the Amun Temple. And the project here is a project by the Egyptian Museum Berlin in association with the National Corporation of Antiquities and Museums in the Sudan. The head of the project is Professor Wildung, who is the director of the Egyptian Museum in Berlin, who is at the moment busy in Egypt, but he will be here next week. Representing him, I will try to explain to you a little bit about the Amun Temple, which we are at the moment excavating. The project of the Egyptian Museum Berlin began in 1995 after close association with the National Corporation of Antiquities, and especially with the director of the corporation, Hassan Hussein. We started this project with the financial help of the National Corporation of Research Foundation in Germany, and they are funding the whole project. It's a research project trying to discover what exactly the temple looks like and what the site in general looks like. The major features of this site is the Amun Temple, at the entrance of which we are standing. Then there's also the Lion Temple, the Apedemak Temple, a little bit further down on the side, and of course the very famous kiosk, which is also standing in front of the Apedemak Temple. The Amun Temple here is kind of a mixture between Egyptian and Sudanese style. It was built about 50 before Christ, and we are standing now in front of the entrance gate. The total entrance wall, including the two pylon walls, were much higher than only the gate. So you have to imagine that this is only like the entrance door, whereas on the sides there would be huge pylons much higher than this entrance gate. The entrance gates are always built of stone, whereas the walls were built of bricks. And this is the reason why you don't see the walls. The walls have fallen down, whereas the gates built of stones have stayed up. The entrance gates are also decorated, as you can see, very nicely. They are decorated in a typical scenery showing classical scenes of the main god. That's the ram god, the god with the ram head, as you can see here. That's Amun. Amun shown one time with the ram head, typically for the Sudan. And on the left side here shown in the human head, also with a high feather, which is typical for the Egyptian god. That it's a Nubian god meant here, you can see by the ram head, which is only shown in the Sudan. In Egypt, Amun is never shown in this way. Typical also for the entrance is that the god is welcoming the queen on the right-hand side, and here he's welcoming the king on the left-hand side. The welcoming gestures into the temple is always putting your arm on the elbow of somebody, taking them into the temple, so to speak. This is why they are represented like this here. You can see it very nicely. Underneath is a typical decoration showing the Nile gods. The Nile gods are always shown as having a little bit of a fat stomach because they are supposed to be fruitful. They are bringing all good things into the valleys. This is why you have these little stomachs here. And they are typically at the bottom of temples carrying the whole temple, so to speak. The Nile is the main giver of life, so they are always shown as a decoration around the bottom. On the top, on the lintel, you can see very fine reliefs of the Amun, the Nubian Amun, sitting on the right-hand side, sitting on his throne, and in front of him the king is coming. Behind the king is the queen, and behind one of their sons. On the other side, exactly a parallel scene, except that the god Amun this time again with the human head, again the king, the queen, and the son behind. And they are bringing offerings to the god. That is the typical scene which is normally shown in these kind of temples. On the top you see a sun disk. In the middle, the sun dial itself, and on the right and the left, wings and the cobra snakes. Typical protection sign when you go into a temple. It should be everywhere, wherever there's a door, there should be this protection sign of the sun god Ra on top before you enter the area. When we first started excavating here, all of this was practically covered with rubble up to this area, so that when people were coming, they were walking up here to go into the temple, so that the gate looked very small because you were walking very high. And since this time we have completely cleared this area, so that now you actually are walking on the normal level, in the same level that normally the people at that time were walking, about 50 before Christ, in this time period. When you go inside now, you can see all the different rooms behind each other. You see that the main area was plastered with stone, and that there were different door jambs inside. The first door was one big wooden door with only one leaf opening. In the next two entrance gates, there were two doors opening in both directions. You can see that by the marks in the stone inside. And I don't know, inside in the first room, there were columns originally. There were 8 columns. All of these had fallen down when we first came here. As a matter of fact, you could only see the top of this one column originally. And all the other columns were covered by rubble and sand and different things. After clearing this room, the so-called hypostyle, we found that all the rest of the drums of the columns were there. So that in future it would be possible, after removing the bases and checking if underneath it's strong enough to hold the columns again, after checking this we may be able to reconstruct this room. But until this time, we still have to check the base, if the bases are strong enough. We don't know this yet. Theoretically, it would be possible to reconstruct many other things, but it's always the same problem. You have to have financial support for reconstructions, and this is very difficult to find. Research money is very easy to get, but reconstruction money is not so easy. We've also reconstructed all these ramps. As you can see, they have already been put up again. Originally, when we came here, these ramps were all laying on the floor and were covered by sand. So this front part has already been reconstructed. The cooperation with the Antiquity Service, I would like to point out, is unbelievably good. They are helping us in every possible way that anybody can imagine. We can only have the greatest praise for them. Without them, we wouldn't be able to do this. They are always supporting us in different aspects, in trying to arrange different things and trying to help us with arranging men to come to this area and transport and various other means. So I can only praise the Antiquity Service. It's helping us in every possible way.
Hi, I'd like to welcome you to the site of Dangale. I'm Dr. Julie Anderson from the Royal Ontario Museum, a research associate there. This is an archaeological project. It's joint Sudanese-Canadian. We're working with the National Corporation for Antiquities and Museums and working with Dr. Salah Mohammed Ahmed there. We've been excavating here for 2 years now, so this is a brand new project and it's very exciting. We have a walled Meroitic city that's 2,000 years old. We've started excavating in a mound in the center of the city, and it's an Amun temple. We have a very large pylon we've excavated that's 5.5 meters wide by 15 meters long right now. We've excavated only half of it, so it'll be over 30 meters long when we're finished. The entire temple will measure 30 meters by at least 60 meters, and it is to the god Amun, as I mentioned. The walled city itself, well, we're standing here on the gate, and there was a large gate that was the entrance, and it faced the Nile, and then the wall went around the city. There was a bastion in one corner, a tower, possibly where the police or the Meroitic police would guard the city. We also have a large house on the site where the priests would have lived, who worked in the temple. And then outside the city, we have domestic occupation. This is where regular people would have lived. What we find on the site is we find a lot of bread molds, and let me see if we can find a bread mold here. This is the gate, and we're walking down through the gate towards the main entrance to the Meroitic temple. The temple's to the god Amun. He's the ram-headed god, and he was the god of the king, of the royal family. Amun is known as the hidden one, and he's usually portrayed as a ram, a haruf. Now, as I was mentioning, this is a bread mold. These are the bases of bread molds. This is a Napatan period one, so it's a little earlier, and this is a Meroitic one. And they would build the pot this way, and then they would put the bread inside it, stick it in the oven, take it out when it was done, and then break the mold. So all we have are pieces of these all over the site. So we're heading now towards the main gate. On my right is the priest's house, and it's a fairly large mound also. Most of the mounds on this site are preserved 4 meters high. It's a very, very wonderful, wonderful site because most of the buildings are almost preserved to their roofs. We're now standing in the Meroitic gate. We haven't reached the floor yet, but if you look around, you can see how well this is preserved and how high it is. It's quite large. It's at least 2 meters high up in many places. For example, right here. The floor is sandstone. We've seen a section of it in another place, and it's approximately 20 centimeters below the level that I'm standing on now. As we walk through the gateway, the Meroites would have been walked into a columned courtyard, and we have preservation of half of the courtyard right here because we're only digging half of the temple. And right now we have 5 columns preserved. These columns are 1 meter in diameter, 1 meter 20 centimeters in diameter. And let's just go here. And they're plastered on the outside with a white plaster. Much of the gate was plastered also with a white or a slightly yellow plaster. It wouldn't have been the red brick that you see now. It would have been much more decorative.
The archaeological activity in the Sudan represents an important example of international cooperation in the field of culture. Archaeologists can be considered as ambassadors for peacemaking. They have kept coming to this country regardless of the changing international diplomatic relations. The Sudan government considers the remains of the country's past as a part of the cultural heritage of mankind at large. Scholars of the world are warmly welcome to participate in rescuing the relics of this past. They will always meet very pleasant, smiling people.